Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Breakfast special.
Singapore's Electoral Boundaries Review Committee, or EBRC for short, has been formed. This comes ahead of the country's next general election, which must be held by 23rd of November this year, and the first under the country's fourth-generation leadership led by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong.
The committee is convened by the Prime Minister ahead of every contest to review and make changes to Singapore's electoral map and will take into account population shifts and housing developments to adjust the number of voters across electoral divisions.
So what are the next steps and what are the possible movements we might see? For more insights, we're joined by Dr. Gillian Koh, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies. Gillian, thanks for joining Money FM. Good morning.
Good morning, Audrey and Emaad. How are you?
Doing great. Always great to have you on, Gillian. And lots to unpack today. So let's start with the timeline we can expect here. So previous committees have taken anywhere between 3 weeks and 7 months to complete their reports. So I think, we're all wondering what kind of timeline should Singaporeans be expecting this time round? And what exactly will the committee be mulling about, or the key considerations the committee will deliberate on before making changes to boundaries?
Well, the first timeline to bear in mind is that in Singapore, the parliamentary terms are 5 years long. So this parliamentary term, the 14th that we're in, began on the 21st of August 2020. So, the actual 5-year limit comes to an end towards the end of August. But you referred to a date, November 25, that the election has to be held by, and that is under extenuating circumstances. Parliament is able to extend the term by 3 months and extend a budget. So, number one, I would expect that the committee will certainly try to respond well before August. Second, you asked me what it would be considering, and I think you also did mention that there are population shifts that will have to be taken account. I know that we'll talk about what the Prime Minister said to the EBRC in terms of what he would like to see in size of GRCs, the proportion of, seats given to SMCs in relation to the whole full number of seats, and also the average ratio of voters to MPs. But that's where the question of where people are now located will enter into the equation. You'll recall, and I'm sure many of your voters, readers, listeners will know, there's been a lot of new estates built since 2020. One property consultancy company put it down to, about 92 new housing projects being completed by HDB, which means that about 75,000 households have been formed in Punggol, Tengah, Bidadari, Yishun, Kempas. So we can expect that, yes, the EBRC will be contemplating what these new population, centers will mean in terms of providing fair representation of these people, which means the ratio of voters to MPs, and that will result in rethinking of some of these electoral boundaries. One final point, remember that part of the announcement yesterday about things to do with elections is that, the voter rolls, the electoral rolls open again. So this is going to be a process which allows Singapore citizens to check that their names are there. And this will then take into account the new housing estates, people moving to new places in Singapore, and locking in where they will be voting. So this is so important because these boundaries will have to take into account, as I mentioned just now, the significant changes in the number of electors in different parts of Singapore, in the new estates primarily.
Yeah, a lot of demographic shifts since the last GE. And speaking of which, at that last GE, there were 14 SMCs, the most since 1991. 6-member GRCs were taken out of the picture. Do you think a few more SMCs could be carved out on this occasion, or might it just be minor boundary changes?
Well, I think that might indeed be a possibility, granted that the Prime Minister's terms of reference to the EBRC is to maintain the ratio of SMC seats within the whole equation of the number of seats or electoral divisions altogether. So at 14, you may maintain the number if you maintain the total number of MPs from 2020 is 93. But I think that's going to change, and therefore that would allow for leeway to have more SMCs. But I think really the answer is this, that there may be changes to boundaries everywhere because of those new estates. And while the number may stay the same or be tweaked, the place, the location of these SMCs might change. The bottom line, as I mentioned really, is to make sure that there is good representation of citizens by MPs. So we're looking at the ratio of voters per MP. And right now, the top end of the range for the 2020 election was 38,000. And one of the terms of reference is to maintain that. And so boundaries may well be redrawn so that there'll be more GRs, SMCs, a few more, but the location of those SMCs may change.
All right, Gillian, let's hone in on GRCs as a whole. So over the years, there has been discussion over the GRC system and whether it's still relevant today. So what are your thoughts on the key movements we might see on the PAP's end, and where do you see the key battlegrounds?
Well, the discussion on GRCs in the past center on 2 points. First, whether they do allow fair representation of ethnic minorities. And remember, GRCs provide a minimum guarantee that ethnic minorities be represented in Parliament at the end of the day. But when you have large GRCs, let's say 6-person GRCs, with the requirement of one minority among 6. And that is a ratio that is smaller than the national proportion, where we know that ethnic minorities are a quarter of Singapore population, right? So the closer you can get to 4-person GRCs, where one minority is stipulated among the GRC members, then you're closer to that. And that's why over the years, you've seen the GRCs grow smaller. The average size in 2006 was 5.3, and that's come down now in 2020 to 4.65. So, I think the GRCs that. But secondly, when you have very large GRCs, the complaint has been from alternative parties and academics like my peers is that it makes it very difficult for smaller alternative parties to contest. Obviously, they are, less well-resourced, and they have to find that many more people to not just contest, but to support the candidate in the campaign. So shrinking the size would be better, but let's recall that yesterday the Prime Minister, in his terms of reference to the EBRC, is to keep that number small as it is, which would be 4.6. So in that sense, we can expect that there won't be the very, very large GRCs of the past. We can expect that if you do want to ensure this level of contestability, that means parties can contest, and representation. Remember, we talked about the average number of voters per electoral division, per MP, then, with the population shifts, the EBRC would be looking at where there would be need for boundary changes in order to do all of the above, right, especially with population shifts. So we can expect that there will be some shifts really because of the new estates that I mentioned earlier, of which there were so many, over the past 5 years. Good thing, right? Because young Singaporeans looking for new homes, but also older Singaporeans are downsizing. So there's a lot of change in population densities. And I think that's where the story begins, and boundary changes will be tweaked for that.
Yeah, Gillian, several movements since the last GE, both on the part of the PAP as well as the opposition. But let's touch on the PAP first. So former Minister S. Iswaran, Tan Juan Jin and Cheng Li Hui are out of the picture. Given that it will be PM Wong's first time leading the PAP through a GE, what sort of team do you think he'll be looking to form? And are you expecting some of the more seasoned ministers to retire this time around, or might we see them serve out one more term?
Well, first, because the average ratio of voters to MPs remains, when you have more population, greater population density, certainly in the areas that I mentioned, right, from Punggol to Pitatari to Tengah, then I think that, with the changes in GRCs, you will have that, which means that you're likely to have far more seats, far more electoral divisions at the end of the day. If so, each party, every party, including the PAP, which contests right across the island, is going to find that it needs far more candidates. So to answer your question, I expect that there will probably be a need to call on as many seasoned hands as possible, in addition to new faces that the PAP has. And of course, that also means that the alternative parties will find that they will need more resources, but they can also then decide which bits they have a long-term relationship with and contest. So, yes, the second point I would make is that the PAP itself always aims for this principle of balancing continuity with change. So I think that there will be, of course, a standing down among their party ranks and candidates or MPs of about a third. This is what they usually do. And Mr. Lawrence Wong is not a new, hand in the party ranks when it comes to election campaigns. He's been there since 2011 and been known to be very much part of shaping party policy. So I think for that reason, this is not going to be his first rodeo, although it's the first time round he'll be leading the party as section. And so I think you'll see that it will be the tried and tested of standing down of a third, replacement with new faces, but generally because you need more candidates, or it's likely that there'll be need for it. You'll see some seasoned hands alongside the fresh faces.
Okay, let's look at the opposition now. We saw Raisa Khan, Leon Pereira, Nicole Seah resign from the WP, and verdict for the case of WP's chief Pritam Singh is fixed for 17th of February. So to what extent will the court verdict affect how things might play out for the WP, taking into consideration that it has also lost several of its key members who would have been likely candidates?
Well, again, this is not a new scenario whatsoever. And what you have mentioned is everything that we have anticipated, including the court case. We were told that, the prosecution is not a custodial sentence, but a pecuniary, a financial one. And it's unlikely that Secretary General of Workers' Party, the current leader of the opposition, is going to be disqualified from being a candidate. But you've mentioned the loss of certain MPs, and this was a while back now, and I'm sure that the Workers' Party is already prepared fresh faces to fill these gaps. And I think you mentioned Ms. Khan. She's in Sengkang, and that's certainly the new GRC that they took in 2020 of great interest to them because of the breakthrough of taking not one but two GRCs. So I think that they certainly have to look for a minority candidate in Sengkang, and we've seen that the PAP has already also surfaced some of the fresh faces that they'd like to feel there. And, in Aljunied, which is their stronghold, the WP stronghold, has certainly, I'm sure, been working to train up very many good candidates there. One face that we are made aware of course, in the public is the lawyer, Mr. Harpreet Nihal Singh. And so I think that these are not surprises, and the WP will probably have plans to bring out these fresh faces in due course.
Can get a quick answer for you on this next question. Taking into consideration the younger demographics of electorates that will feature in this upcoming GE, as well as the various sagas over the past few years, what are the gaps that the various political parties will have to fill to gain the trust of this key demographic? And your 45 seconds begins now. No, I'm just kidding. Take your time.
The first one is that, remember, we talked about population shifts, and these shifts are primarily constituted by new young families. So the first issue is really to find candidates that young couples, young marrieds can identify with. Second, I mentioned the ethnic minorities, and that's a very key part of our electoral system. So the parties will also have to look for that. Third, even though we mentioned that there are new estates, I think one hot topic for the younger demographic is really about housing and affordability and accessibility of housing. And that's why you see that the current housing minister has said so much about access and pricing, and really that many more flats to be put on stream in the next 2 years.
All right, Gillian. Well, before you go, we have to ask the million-dollar question here. In the four contests called by PM Wong's predecessor, Lee Hsien Loong, in 2006, 2011, 2015, and 2020, the gap from the EBRC's formation to the election being called ranged between 3 and almost 11 months. So, with Singapore another step closer to the GE, when is the earliest you think we can expect polls to be called? When should we be ready?
Well, if we are true to the spirit of wanting to take into account the population shifts, then the opening of the electoral rolls and then the completion of the updating of those electoral rolls ends on the 1st of April. So it has to be between the 1st of April and, as I mentioned, the normal 5-year parliamentary term ends on the 23rd of August. So it has to be between the 1st of April and 23rd of August. And I would think that it'll be certainly after people feel the effects of some of the support that will be announced in the budget this year, because the world is going through a great period of uncertainty. So when Trump has, in the U.S., decided on various policies to do with trade, we'll know how we'll come out. So the budget will probably want to anticipate some of that, and the PAP, being a political party, will want to pick the best time between April and August to feel that the people, businesses, the community is cared for, feels that they believe that the PAP will support them through these times, that they would call it.
All right, well, the stopwatch has started, unpacking what to expect with the formation of the EBRC, a key milestone in the lead up to the general election this year. Gillian, always great to speak with you. Thanks for your time and insights this morning.
Likewise, thanks, and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Gillian. That was Dr. Gillian Koh, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies, right here on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.